Welcome to L&D Disrupt, the podcast dedicated to helping you overcome workplace challenges and prepare for the future of work today. I'm your host, Nelson Sivalingam, and I'll be speaking with the movers, shakers, and path breakers in L&D who are reshaping their organizations right now. Join us each week as we delve into the highs and lows of work in the industry to get to the real nitty-gritty stuff that you actually care about.
Welcome everyone to another episode of L&D Disrupt Live, the podcast powered by HowNow. This week we are talking about building skills and community in the banking industry. So in a fast changing world, there's actually a lot we can learn from the world of banking. The context and environment keeps evolving. There are loads of stakeholders who want short and long-term results. And there's a real strong desire among people to be connected to purpose. And I think there's a lot of transferable lessons from how banking tackles those issues that we can apply to everyday L&D. So I'm pleased to say that I'm joined by NatWest Group's Roganna Ranjan, Learning Strategy Manager, and Sean McGovern, Head of Customer and Community Learning, to dive into all of these topics. Welcome both of you to the show.
Thank you very much, Gary. Thank you for having us. And hi, everyone else who's just joined.
So I think it makes sense because you both do kind of different roles and the context of those roles will have a real bearing on some of the topics we discussed today. So I'd love to just hear in like a minute or two what you do at NatWest and what your role is. So Sean, did you want to kick us off?
Yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned, I lead out on our customer and community learning strategy. So what does that actually mean? I work within L&D with Roganna, and my responsibility is to really look at, predominantly in the short term, what is our kind of learning journeys that we create for youth within the marketplace. So we have a number of different channels that we engage young people through, and those may be in schools and universities, colleges, etc. And my responsibility is kind of looking at that from a curriculum point of view and understanding where those unmet needs are and where we can really show up within the community for young people. So really diverse role. I spent a bit of my time in the bank prior to coming into L&D working within entrepreneurship. So you'll hear me probably talk quite a lot about that because it's a kind of passion of mine. I kind of, without going way back, started my own social enterprise in Glasgow. That led me into the world of entrepreneurship and then started working in what is now our enterprise proposition. So we've got a number of different accelerator hubs that exist in all the major cities in the UK. And I started helping and supporting on running those hubs before moving into entrepreneurship education and then broadening that out even further and looking at general kind of youth education as a landscape. And that's kind of brought me to where I am now. I hope that was a fair enough synopsis of it, but
Perfect.
I'm here to answer as many questions as you've got as well throughout.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean. Roganna, how would you describe your role?
Yeah, so my role kind of focuses more specifically on looking at the learning strategy for the organisation. So that's looking at 2023, but also kind of looking at what we've got in store for the future as well. We know that there's so many disruptors going on in market at the moment. So it's really making sure that we're building that future-proof strategy for 24 to 28. So working really closely with the bank strategy and our business areas to understand the collective needs of our learners and kind of build that future-proof strategy. And then I guess it's almost twofold in that another part of my role is kind of looking at innovation and looking at how we can start to use innovation to really transform and simplify our learners' experiences. And then I guess to give a bit of background as well. So I actually started on the HR grad scheme a couple of years ago, and my very first placement was in learning and development. And then since then, I've kind of really got the chance to experience different roles in different parts of the organisation, both outside of HR into digital banking and then kind of back into HR in different roles before back to this kind of role, which is a super exciting one all about designing that strategy.
Sounds interestingly enough that you've both kind of been on this learning and evolution journey through NatWest as a company. So it's nice to know that the proof is in the pudding. We're speaking today about L&D at NatWest and with two people who've kind of had a great trajectory through the company. A couple of things you mentioned there, Roganna, tee us up nicely for the first question, because you mentioned like the idea of long-term planning. Obviously, there's a lot of different stakeholders there. You've also got the balancing act of ensuring that your learners' needs are met. So in an organization like NatWest, where you're dealing with a lot of those different stakeholders, different requirements, how do you kind of strike that balance? Because I'd imagine there's people in similar roles, but with different contexts, like in branch and at home. You've got people whose roles might be affected by regulation to different degrees. So as you build an L&D strategy and content and experiences, how do you approach that balance?
And that's a really good question. But I think when you look at it holistically, it is just focusing about creating that personalized approach to learning. I mean, in order to become a true learning organization, we need to really focus on how we can empower people to learn what they want, when they want, not just in the role that they're doing today, but also the careers that they want to have tomorrow. So it's really about helping employees and colleagues, regardless of what they're doing across the organization, really feel empowered to take learning into their own hands. Now, this is something that we obviously need to put the right support in place to help them to do so. So we structure our delivery around core, common, and technical learning, and we focus on reducing the number of systems to consume that content through what we call our Learning Academy. And this is kind of made up of our strategic capabilities and allows businesses to really kind of share their own content, aligned to a specific skill, and colleagues, again, regardless of whether they're working back office or perhaps in branch, for example, can access this and access content in a variety of different formats. So you can click on a tile, let's say it's on kind of agile development, and then you can decide, do I want to watch a video? Do I want to do a quick course on it? So it's really about giving people the opportunities to make learning a personalized experience based on their own preferences and interests.
Yeah, it's really interesting because it's kind of just taking the fundamental principle and applying it on a bigger scale. Though you might have a lot of stakeholders and learners, actually the best thing to do is understand what that person's context is. So what problems are they trying to solve? What's their aspirations? And then how do we reduce the friction to finding the content that supports them and give people the choice? So is that kind of without oversimplifying it, is that the fundamental approach, is just to understand every learner's context and try and support them in getting to their goals?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you look industry wide at the moment, and the rise of AI is kind of in every market. It's like, you can get personalized trainers, you can do this and we'll track your sleep, we'll track these metrics. It's all about being personalized. And when you feel like, you've got a good understanding of how you work, you're then able to kind of make the best out of what it is you're doing. And it's the same in learning to an extent, where it's all about giving people the right tools in order to be able to kind of take learning into their own hands, because we're learning all the time. It's not just that kind of, let me book onto a course and a workshop and that's the only opportunity you have to learn. Like, I've picked up great things off of sort of Instagram and social media and different things that you can then apply. So it's just about creating the right tools to give people that personalized experience.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I've got this folder on my phone, which is screenshots I've taken of other people's marketing ideas to steal. And there's a funny meme that basically every marketer has this like inspiration screenshot folder. So you're right. It's about that kind of going with the ways people learn every day. Sean, to bring in what you do, I was going to say...
going to just jump in really quickly there with that as well. And I think we see that as well, especially I think we can learn a lot from the external marketplace. So what do our customers want? What are we trying to move towards in terms of, to Roganna's point, that hyper-personalization? So I think it's really important that if we think about the million-dollar question of answering how to make great learning, it is learning that's right for you at the right point in time in the right channel that caters to your learning style. So how do you manage that? And how do you make sure that through all of the abundance of different channels that exist in the ether, and the different ways that you can engage people, how do you kind of make sure that you have something that caters to all of those things, to all of those key kind of benchmarks? I think that we have learned a lot from dealing with the external customer and understanding, things like Roganna touched on it. TikTok is a really big channel for us, and I know we're kind of going to talk a bit about digital as well in a moment, but TikTok's really important. YouTube, like, people are not going through traditional channels to pick up content and learn and digest it. So how do we meet the learner where they are and when they need it most? And I think that strategy is how we're approaching external learning, but it's also very much how, as a bank and as a kind of large kind of employer in the UK, how we're approaching internal learning as well. But Roganna, I'll get me in trouble if I've misrepresented that in any way.
No,
No,
Roganna's smiling, so I think we're all good. Just to come back before, like you said, we're going to move on to talking about digital a little bit, but I guess it's the same for you, Sean. You're dealing with like a lot of different stakeholders, spinning different plates. There's different requirements. There's different context to understand. So do you follow a kind of similar approach to the one Roganna outlined there when you're working with people to do that community learning part, or is there a different kind of train of thought that you?
So very, very similar, but we also kind of build on it. So a lot, if I take a couple of the programs that we've done, fundamentally the principles remain the same. Probably where there's a bit of a nuance is the tools in which we're allowed to use to deliver that learning. So for example, TikTok's not a tool that's widely used in the bank, but it's certainly a tool that you probably use with an external audience. But very same principles in that we do a lot of co-collaborative building. So we worked really closely when we were doing our NatWest Thrive program with youth workers themselves, but also with focus groups of young people to understand how do they want learning to show up in their spaces. We kind of have a traditional approach within schools of lesson plans. What we've done within the NatWest Thrive world, and again, I'll build on that a little bit when we talk about the programs that are on offer within the youth club setting. But what we've done within that space is look at how do we really bring into that space gamification, plug and play? How do we bring in opportunities for you to pick your journey, not necessarily prescribed? So again, back to that self-directed learning, we have a lot of opportunity for you to plug and play different lesson plans and modules that can be picked up by the youth worker within the space based on their needs at that moment in time. So we've really tried to listen to the learner and listen to the facilitator in those environments to build what we hope is really innovative and exciting learning for young people.
Yeah, I think I was speaking to an L&D consultant a little while ago who like works with a lot of different companies, and he said that he'd spent one day going out with a sales rep who went to like doctor surgeries to sell them, I think it was like phone lines or something like that, but like being in that field, seeing what they do when they're trying to apply the learning to help other people. Like it sounds like it's a similar approach for you. You're understanding, especially when people are going out to the community, what's actually happening when they're trying to share those skills and understanding the final end of it.
I think the kind of core of it all is I kind of had this drummed into me from day dot because of entrepreneurship, but what is your customer telling you? That is basics and principles of customer discovery. So kind of flipping on its head the traditional approach to building, which is we think and we will bank out, build it, and then hope that people will come and use it or have a really great experience through it. And then we'll take feedback to kind of iterate on that. Actually, it's starting at the very root of what customer discovery is all about. And it's building the product around your customer's behavior. So we very much take that customer-centric design approach when trying to develop new content. And, what is the market telling you? What is the customer and the individual who's actually experiencing and using the learning telling you? What is their behavior telling you? So it's almost kind of that entrepreneurial design approach to developing learning products.
No, I totally agree. Flipping it on its head, so you think about building it with the customer in mind, is so much better than just falling into the tried and tested and trusted approaches. Something you alluded to earlier is that digitisation, and I think banking is probably an industry that's seen this far earlier than anyone else, because since 2015, more than 5,000 banks in the UK have closed. So those branches closing mean it's becoming a more digitised industry kind of over a sustained period now. And to me, it seems like maybe two things are happening at once. There's a smaller pool of people we have to give certain skills to, which is working in a branch, but there's also this growing need to give people skills for a future role before they become kind of irrelevant or face the risk of redundancy. So I'd love to know how you approach this sort of twofold thing and your general thoughts on digitisation, but this idea of building skills for now and skills for the future.
So we've done a lot of work recently with the Financial Services Skills Commission and also research inside our organisation to really identify what our top 10 future skills are. And once we've kind of got those top future skills established, we really built this whole campaign around giving people the ability to build those skills for the future. And we've done this by investing 2 days in the year for them to use for their development. So they've got 2 days that they can book out in the year, regardless of what role they do, to kind of decide, okay, this particular skill, this aligns to kind of some of my broader interests. This is what I want to focus it on. And this is how I'm going to map that journey. So going back to personalization, they can choose the content as part of that skill that they want to do in order to plan their day. Or, for example, they can kind of decide that they want to maybe split it over 4 days, but use that time up in different ways. And this is kind of giving colleagues that opportunity to really start thinking about their futures and investing in them. But I guess another thing that we really kind of focus on looking at is actually just reskilling programs in the organization. So we've got roles that we know that are likely to be at risk of becoming automated, and that's only going to become more and more common as time goes on. But it's recognizing early on what jobs we see more so being driven by automation, and how do we take that pool of people with those great skills and get them early involved into this reskilling program so that then they're up and ready for future jobs that we identify. So we've got these reskilling programs in things like data engineering, data analytics, human-centered design. And I guess those kind of 3 topics aren't necessarily new, and I think they're quite kind of buzzwords in industry at the moment, this real push on engineering and data and analytics. But actually for us, it's kind of moving past just the buzz in industry around it, but actually working really closely with our business areas and identifying, okay, what do we think the outcome of this is? Where do we see those skills actually being applied into a future role that's of benefit to the business? And that's kind of a big focus in how we're really kind of future-proofing the organization. And I guess another part is just kind of really looking at what our skills taxonomy and what skills are going to start looking like moving forward. Because again, in the past, you have, here's a traditional role and here's the traditional list of skills that you've got ascribed to a role. But now it's very much this idea of having transferable skills, having a skill in one thing, for example, if you're good at maths and you're good at kind of coding, then you can use that in the coding space, but you can also use that in kind of Excel and in different kind of skills in industry. So it's really kind of aligning skills to roles as opposed to skills to kind of linear job profiles.
Yeah. I have 2 quite interesting follow-up questions. Well, I say they're interesting. I'm tooting my own horn there, but I would love to know if you learned anything through that process of understanding which roles are at risk of being automated that other people might find useful.
I think it's just kind of keeping things on the horizon. So that you're constantly looking at innovating and simplifying and looking at what technology is kind of out there. And so as part of that, I think it's quite easy to then kind of see, okay, actually, if we take the common example of branches, for example, you've got someone that, before a lot of people would go into branches, but now a lot of people kind of use online banking, for example, as an area of platform choice. But that's not to say that you've got a person in branch that's not got great communication skills. They're likely to have great networking skills, having based on dealing with lots of customers day in, day out. And those are, having good communication skills and networking skills is one of our kind of future capabilities. It's something we recognize as a really important skill. So it's about kind of taking those skills and kind of mapping them to different kind of roles that we've got moving forward.
Yeah, it sounds like 2 really interesting things are happening there. Like you said, you're looking at what skills people have and not necessarily saying, like, go straight into the role that's most linked to the one you do now, but these skills might work somewhere else. And coming back to what you said earlier, you're giving people that freedom to go look at content, go look at learning resources, and maybe understand where they want to go next, rather than just prescribing what the next career move is for someone who maybe is in a role that's transitioning to digital or changing in some other way. So does that kind of help as well, giving people that freedom to go away and explore what they do next at NatWest?
Yeah, I think so. We've had a real strong uptake in people already starting to use their learning for the future days. And it's been really nice just through our internal channels, seeing a lot of people that kind of work in that branch and, really core areas of our banking industry. They're usually the first to kind of share posts about how they've just done their day looking at data security or looking at various things. And it's generating that buzz and excitement. But it's really nice to kind of get that feedback from these individuals to kind of see how they've benefited from it already. I know that one person spoke about how just doing a module that we had on cybersecurity actually prevented them from falling for a potential fraud trap in their own kind of personal life. So it's really good to kind of see people taking these learning opportunities and seeing how it applies to their kind of day-to-day lives as well.
Mini follow-up question, and I promise we'll bring in Sean to hear about digitisation. But when other people are sharing those situations where learning or those future learning days are helping them really learn a new skill or preventing something catastrophic happening, like you say, getting scammed, does that help you strengthen the position of L&D, the perception? Does it kind of build this snowball effect where more people are sharing how it's helped them in a really believable, relatable way, and more people get involved and want to do it themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we definitely try and factor in those great feedback opportunities as part of our kind of internal engagement campaigns. Because, it's easy for me to kind of sit here as someone that works in the learning industry, talking to other people in the organization about how great learning is, because then I sound a little bit like I'm tooting my own trumpet. But, it's easy for me. It's part of my day job kind of in everything that I do. But again, I think where people are more likely to be able to relate across the business is when they can kind of almost put a name to a face as well and go, oh, that's someone that I used to work with, or that's someone that works in the branch across from me, or that person works in risk and so do I, and they've just done this training. That's something that I can maybe see myself doing. So it is just that opportunity of knowledge sharing, collaboration, but kind of being able to relate to different ones as part of kind of generating that impact to go, actually, lots of people are starting to really take their learning a bit more seriously and kind of use that to generate more interest.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Sean, I'm sure Roganna might have said some things there that inspired you, but generally this topic of digitisation and anything you'd like to elaborate on there.
Roganna has covered absolutely everything I could possibly think of. No, I think the important thing for us, particularly in what we're working really hard on as an organisation, is what we call that one bank approach. So I think when we talk about digitisation and we talk about, preparing our colleagues for the changes that are coming in terms of the future world of work, we take that information and those expertise and that skills and that and what does that future landscape look like, and we use that to inform how we engage with the next generation. So I think from a digitisation perspective, we have a number of different things that we do within the community. One of them being we sponsor Tech We Can, which is a huge programme around coding and future skills. Tech We Can is specifically focused at young females as well. So we've got lots of different things that go on in terms of coding clubs, etc. And it's very much informed by the approach that's taken internally as well. And what we see as an organisation are the demands of the future world of work. So that it kind of has that trickle-down effect into how we inform our strategy and how we prepare young people as well within the kind of youth education space. So I think Roganna pretty much covered everything I would say there, but that would be my summary.
Cool. I blame myself for asking so many follow-up questions, but curiosity killed the cat, I guess. But Sean, you did just tee us up nicely there to talk about more specifically what you do at your role in fostering a sense of purpose and community through development opportunities. So just to throw a couple of numbers at people, but there's a Deloitte survey that said 84% of people want to work for an employer that provides meaningful work, and 41% say they've left their organization due to its purpose or lack of purpose. And I know you told us a bit about what you do, but I'd love to hear kind of how the initiatives you're running, they give that platform for people to build skills, support community initiatives and all those sort of things.
Yeah, of course. I mean, just as a kind of broad overview, we've got a number of different initiatives that are run through schools. We also operate within the youth club space, and we cover everything from employability skills, so down to the very basics of how do I write a CV and how do I sit in an interview and come across effectively and communicate with, with influence and all of the kind of key components of preparing you within that employability space, through to the really obvious ones that a bank should play in, like financial capability, and also enterprise education is another really big component part of that. And what we do with those programs is we drive, obviously, the next generation of young people towards wherever they want to go, whether it be enterprise education and starting a business, whether it be, I want to start working at NatWest and I want to figure out how to do that. Or it might be that you're in a underrepresented population like our NEET population. So for those of you not familiar with that, not in education, employment or training. So we work with all of those various groups. And one of the ways in which we have created a mechanism to try and connect our people to purpose is through what we call our volunteering program. So we've got, each colleague within the bank has access to 3 days of volunteering per annum, and they can use that however they see fit. And through the various different initiatives that sit within my world, a colleague of the bank who could be from any background in the banks, they may not be customer facing, they may not always get access to dealing with the community one-on-one. They could take their volunteering time and donate that towards either the youth club directly themselves, so that could be going in and supporting on a workshop, or it might be that actually you want to map their skills to a particular organisation. So it's a really direct way of connecting people to purpose. So when we think about the stats that you mentioned there about organisations, so, Gen Zs and millennials, and I know from the Deloitte survey, it made for some sober reading about expectations of employers. But, basically, we know that there is an expectation for business to play a significant role in the communities in which they operate. And that's through sustainability, it's through climate, it's through, social mobility, it's through making sure that there's a kind of a sense of us playing or having a responsibility of improving the communities in which we work. And again, a great way of us doing that is really by going in and supporting that next generation. So how we bring both of those two together is through our volunteering programs. So colleagues can go through skills matching. We've got some great examples of colleagues donating time to go in and offer to build out websites, to build out things like marketing plans and strategies, to help on funding applications, to help fund local community projects as well. So there's a whole host of different ways that they can get involved. And I think it's a really tangible way for our colleagues to experience what it feels like within the community, the work that we're doing to try and help support the next generation.
Yeah. Just curious if you've learned any good lessons for people in terms of pairing someone with X skills to Y initiative. Like, is there any common things that work when you're saying this person would be a great fit for this? Even like you said, they might not be in a role that necessarily wouldn't be an obvious connection to a project or initiative, but they might have a skill. So is there any lessons you've learned on that front?
I think in terms of lessons learned, it really is, particularly within, so for example, the youth club sector, there's a real diverse range of needs within that space. So actually what we've learned about it, and what we are learning, because we started this program piloting it this year, but what we are actually learning, and it's evolving to do, is show us that we can support in so many more ways than we thought possible. So actually, where we thought it was about traditional approach of going and helping with a workshop and the bank showing up in that space, we've got and Roganna might correct me if I'm wrong here, but we've got like 60,000 strong workforce with, every kind of possible skill under the sun that you can imagine. There's so much that we can do for organisations that we partner with. So NYE, National Youth Agency, is our partner through our NatWest Thrive initiative. And there's a real abundance of opportunity for us to be out there in the communities, helping in non-traditional ways and really helping bolster the infrastructure of the youth workspace. And that will have an indirect implication on the future of these young people. So I think for me, the big lesson learned is don't just assume that you understand the ways in which you can support your local communities. As a big, large organisation like NatWest, there's a whole abundance of ways in which you can kind of step up and support that next generation.
When we spoke before, you described it, I think, as like a more holistic view of development. And I think what you alluded to there is the perfect example of that. We often talk about understanding what skills we have, mapping them to talk about what we do internally to close our skills gaps. But it also means that if we understand what skills we have, we can do more things like this. You know, we know which people have good marketing skills or public speaking skills, and therefore we can place them in something where they're talking to young people about how to speak to others, right?
Absolutely. And I think the other part of that, Gary, is that, it gives you a chance to probably show skills that you might not necessarily be able to demonstrate in your day-to-day role. So this is a brilliant way of kind of full circle. If there's something that you're working on externally and you're working on a particular skill, it's a great way of linking that back into here's opportunities where you can demonstrate that through doing social good whilst working at the bank. And we actually have a mechanism in place that allows you to evidence that through your PDP. So it means that although you're going out to do something that is, CSR related, you can link it back to your personal development, and you can actually link it back to demonstrate skills that you might not otherwise be using on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a really another really great way of colleagues using our purpose agenda and what we're doing within the community to show how they're building their skill set.
Yeah. Roganna, from your point of view, this can only help really, I guess, foster that sense of knowledge sharing, of like a learning culture of people wanting to seize development opportunities. And I know you work quite closely with Sean anyway, but yeah, what are your thoughts on this approach and how it helps you in your role?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really great way of kind of sharing knowledge and kind of just reaching out with people internally as well. So to kind of give an example of this, I know that a colleague of mine was working with supporting a business startup organization. And whilst the support that person was offering them was kind of, quite aligned to their role, that organization then had some HR related questions that they then asked said colleague for help on. And again, the great thing about being in a bank is we've got such a network of so many different kind of people working in different roles that they then reached out to someone in my wider team to say, hey, I've got someone that I'm working with as part of this volunteering opportunity. And then they were able to bring in that colleague, and then we were able to kind of get them set up with some of our kind of HR offerings to kind of business startups and communities. So it, just with that one interaction, you've then got another 4 or 5 people that have all been involved in helping build something together. And that's, I think, kind of that real value add and kind of being able to share knowledge, but also just being able to network. We've got that kind of internal and external kind of setup where you are just communicating with a lot of different people and you're learning more through that. And I guess if we're looking at that kind of piece around, what our internal and skills development offerings are, it really just helps bridge that gap and allows colleagues to take the development and take lead of their development, and also just bring the whole person to work, both what they like doing inside and outside of the organisation.
Yeah, you've hit the nail on the head and sort of reinforce what Sean said about you often won't get a chance to show all of your skill set at work, and this really helps you kind of tap into that. It leads us nicely on to maybe a wider question on how we connect people to purpose in larger organizations. I think when we spoke before as well, we had this great chat around the idea that when you're not on the front line or seeing directly where impact happens, it can kind of feel easy. It's easy to feel quite a few degrees of separation away from the real purpose and helping people day to day. So kind of an open question, but I would love to know if either of you have any thoughts on how we do connect people to the business mission, the business purpose, when they're maybe not on the front line day to day.
So I'm happy to jump in with that to kick us off. But I think, I've mentioned it a few times now throughout the call, but I think what we do within customer and community learning spaces is a really opportune vehicle for us to be able to drive our purpose agenda, but also engage our colleagues to do that. So when I speak about programs like the NatWest Thrive with Marcus Rashford program, so there's a great opportunity for colleagues to, wherever they are in the bank, they could be sitting in an area, as we mentioned, that doesn't necessarily get to experience purpose, or what we would class as kind of purpose purpose should bleed through everything, but purpose, directly on the front lines. And I think when you look at opportunities through the NatWest Markets Rashford programme, what you have there is a chance to really get out into the community, and whatever way is, most valuable to you, by using the bank's volunteering programme and being able to have a real difference and an impact on the next generation. So, when we look at the programme that we launched last year, 98% of the young people that went through that programme said that their money confidence had increased, and also mentioned 75% of them said that they'd learned new skills as a result of it. So it's a real direct impact. I mean, those are great figures and great stats for us to report on, but that's only made possible by the colleagues who support them on those journeys. So I think that when we think about programs like that, it's a really great example, but that's only one of them. We also have our Money Sense program that we run, which is all around financial capability. We've got our Dream Bigger program, which we run all again around enterprise education. And then we have an employability program, Career Sense, as well. So there is an abundance of ways in which colleagues can use their time within the bank to really go to the front lines of where we're driving purpose and really be part of those journeys and realise and utilise their skills to be able to support the next generation. And again, without talking too broadly about other areas, but there are, a number of other ways that sit outside of custom and community learning. So we've got another area of the bank called Skill Bank, where, we did a lot of support for Ukrainian refugees. So there's a whole host of different ways that you can utilise your volunteering time to be able to bring that to life. And from my world, that's very much around supporting that next generation of youth.
I wonder sometimes if, especially in big companies, people overlook the importance of just the human interaction. If you're in a massive team, you work remote, you don't work with the customers or people who benefit from the product or service you provide, then it really does become a bit impersonal. But like the opportunities you just described there, even just one kind of interaction where you're seeing actually what you do makes a difference in person, or seeing that improvement in people's skills or knowledge in person, I think that makes a huge difference, and it reinforces and creates positive feedback. But yeah, I'm curious, do you think that a big part of that is just giving people who now work often more remotely, is that real human interaction with people?
Do you want me to jump in with that, or Roganna? But basically, I think it's a combination. So that's one element of it. I think also driving the purpose is actually, leading from the front. As an organisation, we talk about our purpose every day, and we kind of and it bleeds through our strategy. It's part of how we communicate with the business. So I think there's a number of different ways in which we engage people on what we're doing as an organisation. I think what we do within this space is one mechanism to really bring both of those concepts together about purpose and practice, and then purpose hypothetically. So that's one strand of it. But I'm going to throw Roganna under the bus and throw over to her and ask her if she wants to build on that.
No, I think that's a really good opening line. You steal all the good points, Sean, and then you pass it on to me, don't you? I'm kidding. But no, as to Sean's point, it is right through our organisation. It's not just something that we because I think sometimes it is easy in a large organisation to kind of see what they offer kind of broad scale and advertise, but actually you and your individual team, whether you have the confidence to be able to ask for a volunteering day, for example, or a learning day, can be quite different in reality. But if you have a look, you log on, you've kind of got your intranet page as you kind of start your day to day, there's usually at least one kind of great success story that comes in different guises, whether it's how someone's used training to help a customer, whether it's someone taking an opportunity to support, one of our employee-led networks or support one of our community offering days. And it's all of this buzz and excitement that's created around it that people can see, can read about. And even just that secondhand exposure just gets more people thinking about it and how they can do it. We've also a lot of teams will have a day together where they use it as a bit of team building to go, okay, let's have a look at this particular kind of organization. They're interested in people that can help with painting, for example. Why don't we ask around our team, see if we can get 10 volunteers on this day and we do it all together collectively. So there's this real kind of collaborative element in it. It's not just you have to go off and do it on your own. You can do it as part of your team and you'll kind of get the support needed to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Think
Yeah, I think there's two great lessons in there that like Sean said, purpose is a day-to-day thing, and you have to kind of see it every day and make it part of what you do in your culture. And like you said, it's about that community thing, or seeing others doing it in practice is the sort of reinforcement you need. The really the purpose is there and it's happening. But Sean, I have a feeling you're going to jump in there.
I was going to just really quickly jump in and say we also do have a team who kind of support on it and on it, bringing our purpose agenda to life. And we've got purpose champions across the bank. So when we think about scalability in a large organisation, we kind of have individuals who sit across the bank who champion our purpose and champion our values. So I think that really helps as well on a more local level to kind of keep that momentum going and to talk to all of the different ways in which you can engage in our purpose and bring that into your everyday conversations within your team.
Yeah, funny enough, we had someone on the podcast a while back who's a Sail GP, which is a company that's approaching the world of sailing more sustainably, and they have a chief purpose officer, I think is her title, and they have these purpose sessions during the onboarding process, so everyone understands from the start. There's clear expectations and understanding of what the purpose is, and then like you said, there's people who champion that across the business, I believe, and that really starting off on the right foot and then keeping that momentum going, having people who own it, is probably only can be helpful, I think. Cool. We're coming up to our last question, and I can't believe how quickly this has flown by, to be honest with you. But the last question I wanted to ask you is, and we've alluded to this a little bit, but often in big companies, big industries, there's this long-term plan that we kind of need to help our stakeholders achieve and reach goals through L&D. But also at the same time, we need our learners and our people to see short-term wins to create that big positive feedback loop around, you learned this from learning, or you got this outcome from a community initiative, you're willing to do it again. So I'd love to know if you have any thoughts on supporting a long-term plan while still helping people with those short-term wins.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess I'll be like, me and Sean were both kind of. And if I just kind of talk about it a bit more broadly, I guess our overriding kind of North Star is, how do we develop a learning organization that actually is filled with proactive learners, where knowledge share becomes second nature, where you've got communities of peers and communities of experts. And it's really kind of shifting and repositioning what learning is. So that if we take that as our kind of long-term goal, then it's really identifying what are our iterative deliverables that enable us to do that. And that could be something as part of, how do we make sure that the content that we're offering people is good, great content, not just anything and everything we can find on a subject matter, but also simplifying the journey to make it easy for learners to access learning. And then through our programs as well. So I know that as part of today's call, we've spoken about some of the programs that we've been running. And often cases, it's just doing a bit of a test and learn. It's about someone having an idea, giving that a bit of a test in a smaller space and seeing, actually, do we want to scale it up? And I think and this is where I think Sean will obviously be able to talk about it a lot more, but just that space around giving someone the confidence to go, this is how I think we can help a community, or we can help someone, and just giving them that platform and license to be able to really use the skills that they've got and feel confident in sharing them with others. And then I guess, kind of going back to that, what's our wider strategy piece? It's about making sure we've got the right stakeholders at every part of that journey. So we were talking about making sure that you've got that customer-centric approach when you're looking at customers. But for us, it's having that learner-centric approach, like really understanding the needs of our learners, working closely with business areas as well, and our bank-wide strategy. But also just having a bit of a cycle of strategy refresh to just kind of check in and test, okay, is our North Star still the right one? Do we want to tweak and change that as we move forward?
Yeah, it sounds like it's, like we said earlier, it's just, have you got the fundamentals in place? And then I suppose just with a long-term plan, like you said, it's having those touch points of, is what we're doing still contributing to the long-term plan? And so nothing revolutionary has happened. It's just you're giving people the freedom and empowering them to learn every day. And you're just making sure that at certain touch points, you are checking in that what you do still contributes to the wider goals. I guess, is that kind of a fair lesson for people to take away?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of just build on what Roganna had mentioned there. I think for us, from a kind of team perspective as well, it's about bringing people along on the journey with the strategy, and making sure, and Roganna's probably touched on this anyway, but like when we build strategy, it's also because given the current landscape and given how quickly things now shift, it's about really staying close to that strategy. So not having a strategy that's built at the beginning of the year and then doesn't get revisited until the end of that year. It's actually, incremental check-ins to ask those questions back into the room, regroup. Are we still running towards the same North Star? Are we needing to pivot? Are we having to rethink what the marketplace is doing? Is there any lessons we've learned over this quarterly period that would inform us to change direction slightly or amend what we thought was going to be our end of year goal? So I think for us, it's about making sure that strategy is not built in a boardroom. It's actually built with all of the team, and the team are very cognizant of how each of the component parts all ladder up into that broader group strategy, and having those checkpoints to say, right, okay, from the top of the house down, how do we fit into that, and how do we fit into that from a pillars perspective? So we've just recently done a round of activity where we kind of broke our strategic priorities down into 5 key pillars. And within that, we brought the entire broader content and capability team through workshops on each of those key pillars and where those teams laddered up into that strategic priority. And then how did that fit into the broader group strategy? And I think, that for us is how you ensure that there's a sense of ownership and that it isn't just something that's created and it comes from the top down. It's actually a shared ownership of how we deliver that strategy.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really good point there, that we need to get people on at the ground level so they understand their role in the overall strategy. And then that probably only helps when we do need to shift and adapt. People are more willing to shift with us because, like you said, they've got some sort of personal investment in it. They understand their role. They get the point and the purpose of kind of when we need to change tack to reach the ultimate goal, I guess.
Yeah, they understand. And I think, again, it comes back to that piece around Simon Sinek said it best. People need to understand your why. And actually, when you understand the broader strategy, you understand the why. And therefore, if there is a change in direction or there's a pause on something, it's really easy to articulate that because they've all been part of the journey to get there. So, yeah, I think that certainly for us is how we remain agile in that ever-changing landscape.
Yeah, and I think just to build on Sean there, it's for us, it is about helping our learners find their why as well. And that's going to be different to each individual. They'll have different reasons that kind of really drive them. But it's just giving them the tools and the platform to be able to go, this is my why, and this is how I know my learning organization, my learning kind of team are helping me develop my interests. So it's all about not just, developing you at work, but developing the whole person. That's something that's really important to us.
Yeah. Perfect. I think that's a lovely note to end on as well. Quite an uplifting sort of topic to wrap up with. But Roganna and Sean, I really want to thank you for coming on the show today. I'll put your links to your LinkedIn profiles in the description so that if anyone wants to connect and reach out, they'll find those there in the show notes or the description. Before you head off, I want to tell you about 2 very exciting things. Death of the LMS, your free guide to skills first L&D is now live. From the numbers that explain L&D's current problems to lessons on how you can build a skills-led strategy, this is going to help you drive more impact through learning. You'll find the link right at the top of this episode's description. And just below that, a link to our new weekly walkthrough, where we show you how this can be done in practice and give you a tour of HowNow, our learning experience platform that gets 5 times more engagement than a traditional LMS. So, thanks for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again for another episode of the podcast.